Hello, everyone, and welcome to our final meeting. This is our fourth DAC meeting, and I would like to welcome our FCC Chairwoman, Jessica Rosenworcel, who will give some remarks to kick off our meeting. I'll turn it over to you, Jessica.
Thank you so much, Isadore. Good afternoon and happy November. I hope everyone has been enjoying just the right amount of Halloween candy. And by that, just to be clear, I mean lots. As always, it's great to be with the Disability Advisory Committee. And I really want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. More importantly, I want to thank you for volunteering your time, your energy, your effort, and your skills to be a part of this important committee. And a special thanks goes to your co-chairs, and that's Isadore and Brian, for leading this meeting and also leading this committee for the past 2 years. So it's been some months since we last met. And before you get to work, I want to comment briefly on the past, the present, and the future. So we'll start with the past because I am really pleased to report that the Commission has been busy in the area of accessibility over the past several months, and it's advanced some big proposals that intersect with the work of this committee. In fact, our September Commission meeting could have passed as a meeting of this committee. It featured not one, but 2 proposals to improve accessibility. The first proposal made emergency alerts more accessible to more people, including those with disabilities. You see, when we turn on the television screen to get information about an impending weather event or other disaster, there is a recorded emergency alert system message and a text crawl that runs typically on the bottom of the screen. Now, because of the way legacy television architecture works, the recorded message was often different and contained less information than the message that went along the bottom of the screen. In other words, these 2 forms of emergency alert didn't have the same basic facts. And this caused problems, especially for people with disabilities who might be uniquely vulnerable in disaster. So we decided to fix it. And in September, we adopted rules to require broadcasters and cable operators to transmit warnings using IP-based formats. This helps because IP-based versions provide more details, including how people should respond to an emergency if something that is unthinkable is happening nearby. In other words, everyone gets exactly the same comprehensive emergency information. Now, a second proposal from our September meeting improves access to communications for incarcerated people with disabilities. Think about it. If you are deaf, hard of hearing, deafblind, or have a speech disability, and you're incarcerated, you're in a prison within a prison, it's very difficult to communicate, even to those who you might need to communicate with on the outside, family, friends, and legal counsel. That's why we adopted rules to require that prison phone providers offer access to all relay services supported by the Telecommunications Relay Services Fund, as well as American Sign Language point-to-point video communications. This is the first time we've required this, and I'm proud of my colleagues for unanimously supporting me in this effort. Now, on top of this, just a few weeks ago, we hosted the 3rd in a series of forums on accessible communications issues. The last one was on accessible emergency information on television. Now, shifting to the present, today you are going to consider a report and recommendation that identifies issues and best practices associated with sending and receiving captioning files so that captioning associated with full-length programming remains available regardless of the distribution method. It's my hope that this is going to help expand the amount of captioned programming that's available, and I want to thank everyone who worked on it for all of their input on this draft recommendation. Now, another important thing to note about today's gathering is that this is going to be the final meeting of this term's Disability Advisory Committee. So that brings me quite naturally to talk of the future. We're in the process of renewing the committee for a 5th 2-year term that would begin in mid-December. And we appreciate all the applications we've already received and look forward to the continued opportunity to be informed by critical stakeholders like you. Now, in closing, I just want to point out this has been a very productive Disability Advisory Committee. You provided valuable insights into some of the most important communications issues for people with disabilities. But it's really more than that. You have done so as we have weathered a pandemic, used technology in new ways, and wrestled with new questions about accessibility. Those questions are going to continue, and I want you to know that at the FCC, we are committed to identifying how the laws we have before us help us promote greater accessibility. More than that, we are committed to working with anyone in Congress who wants to extend the laws we have to new services so that everyone everywhere gets the ability not just to have functional equivalency, but to fully participate in modern civic and commercial life. Thank you so much for your dedication during the past 2 years. I know it's taken time. I know it hasn't always been easy, but I want you to know that I'm really grateful. Here's to a productive meeting and to a more accessible future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chairwoman Rosenwall. I really appreciate your service and your leadership. Hope you have a great day. Now I would like to welcome Commissioner Smitten.
Symington.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's truly a pleasure to be here today, and I'd like to especially thank Josh for the kind invitation to speak. Achieving functional equivalence for the deaf and hard of hearing communities in telecommunications services is not just the Commission's statutory obligation, it is its sacred duty. I'd like you to imagine for a moment, sad as it might be, that you and your loved ones were in a car accident, and some of you were critically injured, but still well enough to communicate with the EMTs. You tell them how you were feeling in your own body and could perhaps convey vital medical information about anyone who is unconscious or otherwise unable to communicate for themselves. But now, imagine that though you were conscious and had full possession of your cognitive faculties, you could not communicate. You could not tell an EMT what you were feeling. You could not convey key medical information about friends or relatives. In fact, you could not speak. Well, for some, that's unfortunately not a hypothetical scenario. As we learned this year from a major provider of video relay services, this happened to 20 of their deaf and hard of hearing staff. They were involved in a serious car accident, suffered serious injuries, and at every moment from on-site medical attention to hospital intake, emergency responders were ill-equipped to communicate, lacking both staff and technology to deal with injured deaf patients and the ability to communicate in what is, for many, their native language, ASL. Of course, addressing scenarios like this would represent a whole of government effort. It's not the Commission's duty alone to address and prevent scenarios like this. But the Commission can serve its statutory obligation to achieve functional equivalence by doing what it can to improve access to enabling technologies for the deaf and hard of hearing, to create robust technical interoperability between those technologies and existing platforms, and to vouchsafe access to best-in-class communications assistants and interpreters to better serve the deaf community across those services we do oversee. And we can work arm in arm with the rest of government to ensure that our efforts magnify those taking place elsewhere in the government. The Commission has done great work to bring down costs in the TRS fund and to better align compensation with the cost of provision of services. So it's time now to critically examine how best to achieve functional equivalence, to ask whether we are presently meeting that challenge, and if not, to work thoughtfully toward doing so by targeted reforms to our rules. Thank you again very much for the invitation to speak today, and I'm looking very much forward to hearing from the rest of the presenters.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Stark, who has provided a video for your viewing today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here today, and thank you for your service and dedication to the important work of the Disability Advisory Committee. Over the last 2 years, it's quite simple. The FCC and our policies are made better by your guidance and recommendations. Thank you for taking the time on top of your full-time jobs to advise us on these important issues. The last time I spoke to this group, I emphasized the importance of representation of people with disabilities in media. So much of the way we see the world is influenced by the media, but media frequently does not accurately reflect our society. Case in point, according to the CDC, nearly 25% of the US population lives with a disability, yet research shows that only 3.1% of characters on screen are represented as disabled. I'm glad to say that real advancements have been announced here since I last spoke on this issue. But of course, I expect more hard work to be done. That brings me to your report today, which contains important recommendations on IP closed captioning files. This is a dynamic time in the media marketplace. We have more content creators than ever, from traditional studios to up-and-coming websites to individuals. More players than ever are then distributing that content, from traditional broadcasters and MVPDs to a profusion of streaming services. And then consumers are receiving that media on more devices than ever, from set-top boxes to smart TVs to computers, tablets, mobile phones. This, of course, means more choice for consumers, but it also means more places for closed captioning files to get lost, potentially in translation. Our goal is for captioning associated with programming to be available regardless of the distribution method or device. Your report shows that there are a number of reasons that we are not yet living up to that goal. What struck me in particular about your report is that many of these reasons are not altogether technical. I don't mean to set aside the technical challenges. As you illustrate, a service or a content owner may change the time code of the content, such as by adding interstitial content like advertising, and throw off the captions. Or a distributor who is re-editing a video that was already captioned may lack access to the necessary master files, resulting in disruption to those captions. I hope that industry listens closely to these outlined technical challenges as well as your proposed solutions. But many of the challenges you outlined don't need quite a technical fix. They're just a function of increased awareness. Small content creators may lack the expertise to caption programming or the awareness to do so. Some app developers may create apps with playback interfaces that do not support captions or that lack unified specifications simply because they don't know that they should. The contracts that address content creation, ownership, and delivery may not cover captioning because the drafters don't know who is supposed to deliver them. The good news is that this lack of awareness is imminently fixable. As I just discussed, there are a number of ways of getting additional information out there than ever before. How can the FCC also help with this? Can we assist with publishing short online guides aimed at these parts of the media ecosystem so that they will turn up in a web search? Can my colleagues and I address the importance of captioning and other accessibility features at events or in publications aimed at those who may have less awareness? Can we otherwise help, support, encourage efforts by developers, content creators, and others to promote education and awareness of these issues? I really look forward to your ideas. Thank you for your continued good work on these important, vital issues. And my thanks as well to the staff, of course, of the Consumer and Government Affairs Bureau for their support and they give this committee and their work on accessibility issues more broadly. I wish you all a productive meeting. Be well and be safe. Thank you.
What a wonderful message from Commissioner Stark. Now I will turn it over to Alejandro Roark, who is the Bureau Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs. Over to you, Mr. Roark.
Hello, and welcome to the final meeting of the fourth term of the Disability Advisory Committee. Thank you to Chairwoman Rosenworcel, Commissioner Symington, and Commissioner Starks for joining us today. It really is hard to believe that we have been meeting virtually for an entire term. DAC meetings are usually when we get the opportunity to connect, interact, network, and discuss important issues that impact individuals with disabilities all over the country. When we meet virtually like this, we are restricted in our ability to interact and network. And because of that, I personally look forward to a day soon when we will finally be able to meet in person and talk individually with each of you. And I think since it's been a whole term and a whole year of me via Zoom, I look forward to meeting a lot of you in person. On the other hand, as we see again and again, the DAC is able to still reach consensus on important issues through these virtual meetings. Later during this meeting, we will actually be discussing and voting on an important report and recommendation from the working group on streamed video programming closed captioning files. This working group has worked hard to identify issues and best practices associated with the transmittal to and receipt of captioning files by video programming providers and distributors, so the captioning associated with the full-length programming remains available regardless of the distribution method. In its report, the working group also included some solutions to increase the amount of captioned programming online. I really just want to thank the working group chair, Kyle from NCTA, the Internet and Television Association, for leading this working group. My thanks and gratitude also to the working group members and especially the drafting subcommittee for their hard work on this important issue. You should all celebrate your hard work. I know that I do over the past 2 years, despite the need to work remotely. And like I said, over the last couple of years, we discussed emerging technologies and their associated accessibility opportunities and considerations. We identified concerns and lessons learned regarding communication access for people with disabilities during the pandemic. We examined telecommunications relay services use on video conferencing platforms and discussed real-time text deployment in the wireline networks, as well as today's recommendations. So we thank many of you who have reapplied for the new DAC term, and we will announce the new members soon, so please stay tuned. The Disability Advisory Committee continues to be the primary and vital source for stakeholder input for the Commission, and your work really does advance the public interest in the accessibility space. So thank you all again for your involvement in this critical endeavor. I want to personally recognize the two DAC co-chairs, Isadore and Brian. Thank you so much for your time, your effort, your service, your commitment. And I think the heart that goes into leading these advisory committees, we know that we're asking a lot of your time. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And now I'm happy to turn the mic over to Diane Birdstein, Deputy Chief of CGB, who helps to lead our Disability Rights Office. So Diane, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Alejandro. And greetings, everyone. I always look forward to the DAC meetings, whether virtually or in person, because so much of what you do advances the public interest and helps inform the FCC about the important issues that affect people with disabilities nationwide. And one method that individuals and organizations can use to effectuate important change is through the Commission's Request for Dispute Assistance, or RDA, process, which was established in 2010 by the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act. Commission staff this afternoon will explain what the RDA process is and how the RDA process differs from our complaint procedures, and then lead a facilitated discussion with you on your organization's experiences with the RDA process. I reiterate all the thanks that's been given to you this morning or this afternoon, and appreciation for all your hard work with the DAC over the last 2 years. I also want to thank the two DAC co-chairs, the chair of the working group, and the Commission staff who work hard to make this meeting possible. Susie Rosen-Singleton, Chief of the Disability Rights Office, the designated federal officer, Josh Mendelson, the Deputy DFO, Will Shell, DRO staff, Robert McConnell and Ivy Davis, media relations staff, Gerard Williams, and the interpreters and captioners, and many more. And with that, I will pass it back to Josh. Take it away.
Thank you, Diane. I am Josh Mendel. This is Isadore. Is it over to me or? Go ahead, Isadore. Go ahead, Isadore. Okay. All right. This is Josh Mendelson. I am the designated federal officer for the DAC, and I am here just to say a few brief remarks about housekeeping, the rules to make sure that this meeting runs smoothly. And of course, there is a team of us working behind the scenes madly to make sure that all of this comes together seamlessly. But for you all, we would like to request that to maximize screen space and to minimize distraction, we would request that only the speaker and the interpreters have their videos on at any given time. Only one person should have the floor at any time. And if you want to raise your hand to ask a question or make a comment, please do click on the Zoom hand raising feature. And then the co-chair or the working group chair will recognize you. Once they recognize you, then you can go ahead, turn your video on, and unmute yourself. Please identify yourself before making your remark. And please do remember to take pauses while you're speaking so that you can have maximum understandability and effective communication. When you're done with your portion, please do remember to lower your hand, turn off your video, and mute yourself. If you don't do so, one of the people working behind the scenes will do so for you. For roll call, which will be coming up next, Brian Scarpelli will be calling each organization by name. So when your organization is called, the primary representative can please turn on their video and say that they're present, or say your name quickly and then turn off your video. This meeting is open to the public. It is being live streamed to www.fcc.gov/live. And also through the FCC's YouTube page. Public participation is welcome, and we are accepting questions. Please do send any audience questions to an email address, which is livequestions@fcc.gov. Again, that's livequestions@fcc.gov, all one word. We will have some time at the end of this meeting to review and discuss audience questions. I want to echo the thanks of the FCC staff who have been working behind the scenes to make this run smoothly. And that's enough from me. I would now like to call on Brian Scarpelli, who will go ahead and run through roll call.
Thank you very much, Josh and Isidore, and it's wonderful to be here with all of you. Okay, so I think Josh just shared how things will go here with the roll call. I'll run through organizations in alphabetical order, and I've tried to take note of who's present. So at the end, we can make sure that I didn't miss anyone. But if somebody isn't showing up in the participant list, I was not going to read them out here. I'll just go in alphabetical order. Here goes. ACT, the App Association, here. Right, Scarpelli. Checking in for the App Association. Next up, American Foundation for the Blind.
Sarah Miller is here for the American Foundation for the Blind.
Wonderful. Apple.
Hi, James Craig is here for Apple.
The ARC.
Hi, Katie Schmidt is here for the ARC.
AT&T.
Linda Vandeloop, AT&T.
Bridge Multimedia Corporation.
Matt Kaplowitz here and Wendy Sapp joining remote. Thank you.
Cerebral Palsy and Deaf Organization. No. So,
I'm here. This is Bark. I am here. Thank you.
wonderful. City of Boston Mayor's Commission for Persons with Disabilities.
Carl Richardson, City of Boston here. Thank you.
Clear Captions.
Hello, everyone. Michael Strecker here with Clear Captions.
Comcast and NBC Universal Media.
Hi, everybody. Angela Ball from NBC Universal, joined by Jerry Parkins and Richard Wickoff from Comcast. Thank you.
Great. The Communication Service for the Deaf Incorporated.
Karen Strauss sitting in for CSD as an alternate today. Nice to see all of you.
Consumer Technology Association.
Hello, this is Rachel Nemeth with CTA.
Convo Communications.
Hello, this is Amanda Montgomery with Convo.
CTIA, the Wireless Association.
Hello, this is Sarah Leggin for CTIA. Thank you.
Great. Deafblind Citizens in Action.
Hello, this is Divya Gale from DBCA.
Great. DeCapta.
Buenas tardes. This is Maria Victoria Diaz for DeCapta.
Hamilton Relay.
Hello, this is Beth Slough with Hamilton Relay.
Great. Hearing Loss Association of America.
Lisa Hamlin, Hearing Loss Association of America.
Great. InnoCaption.
Hi, this is Christina with InnoCaption.
IBM.
Hi, this is Mary Jo Mueller with IBM.
National Association for State Relay Administration.
Hello, this is Travis with the National State Relay Administration. Thank you.
National Association of Broadcasters.
Hello, this is Josh Pryler with the National Association of Broadcasters.
Great. National Association of the Deaf.
Hello, this is Zainab Al-Kebsi representing NAD, the National Association of the Deaf.
Great. National Black Deaf Advocates.
Hello, this is Isidore Nyangabo. I am with the National Black Deaf Advocates.
National Emergency Number Association.
Hello, this is Richard Ray with the National Emergency Numbering Association.
Great. National Federation of the Blind.
Hi, this is Everett Bacon with the National Federation of the Blind.
Here we go. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Everett. NCTA, the Internet and Television Association.
Hi, this is Kyle Dixon, representing NCTA along with Radhika Bhatt.
Great. Perkins School for the Blind.
Hello, this is Kristen Lee representing Perkins School for the Blind.
Sorensen Communications.
It's good to be with you. This is Michael Maddox with Sorensen.
Great. Telecommunications for the deaf and hard of hearing.
Hey, this is Blake Reed for TDI.
Great. T-Mobile.
Hello, Shelley Blakeney here representing T-Mobile.
Okay, great. Trace Research and Development Center.
This is Greg Vanderheiden representing Trace Center, sitting in for Baron Jordan.
Verizon.
Hi, good afternoon. This is Ian Dillner representing Verizon.
Great. And ZP Better Together.
Hello, this is Greg Leibach with ZP Better Together.
Wonderful. So also our ex officio federal government representatives, U.S. Access Board.
Hello, Tim Cregan and my colleague Bruce Bailey with the Access Board.
Thanks. U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services.
Hello, I am Brianne Berger here for the U.S. Department of Education, OSR. Thank you all.
Thanks. And the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Community Living.
Hello, this is Lisa Bothwell with the Department of Health and Human Services Administration for Community Living.
Wonderful. Well, that concludes the roll call here. So thank you all again, and looking forward to a very productive meeting. And I should now turn it over to Susie.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm really so happy to be here today and to give a quick description of myself. I am a Caucasian woman with shoulder-length blonde hair, a black blazer with a maroon shirt. I am chief of the Disability Rights Office and am here to provide DRO updates briefly, along with my colleague Elliot Greenwald, who will focus on TRS services. Can you believe that we're in our last meeting for the 4th term of the DAC? As you've heard from several people already, your hard work and services are really appreciated, and you've contributed significantly to the efforts to improve accessibility for millions of Americans and the international context as well. The last meeting of the DAC was on June 28th, and I'm here to share some highlights. Really, first, I'm pleased to share that we submitted to Congress on October 11th the biennial report to Congress about the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, also called the CVAA, that is required by law. It examines the accessibility of telecommunications and advanced communication services and equipment over the last 2 years. And the major takeaways found that progress has been made in ensuring access to advanced communication services and equipment, telecommunication services and equipment, and internet browsers built into mobile phones from people with disabilities. But there still continues to be areas that need to be improved. One that was identified was video conferencing. We concluded in this report that while the FCC is still continuing to monitor accessibility developments and gaps, Congress may wish to examine whether the CVA should evolve to keep pace with technological developments. And speaking of technological developments, on a new topic, we explored Next Generation TV, or ATSC 3.0, and the possible enhanced accessibility features that may be leveraged through that new technology. In June of 2022, we did seek comment on this issue and other issues as well about ATSC 3.0. The comment period did close on September 6th, but late filings may still be accepted if you have more to add about accessibility. You've already heard from the chairwoman about the wonderful rules that we adopted last month about EAS, the Emergency Alerting System. So I did want to share the other two things that have happened since then with emergency accessibility. On July 16th, it marked the day that we required text and voice to a new 3-digit number, 988. That is to reach out to the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It's also called the Lifeline in short, but please don't confuse that with our other program that's called the Lifeline. This is focused on the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, but it is also called the Lifeline. The Commission adopted those rules, recognizing that texting is important, an important method for communication for at-risk populations, including people with disabilities. So now we have mandated that for voice and text to 988 since July. But some of you have asked us about direct video calling as an option. We do mandate that covered carriers deliver voice and text calls to 988. However, we do not have jurisdiction over the services that the Lifeline provides, and that Lifeline is partially funded and overseen by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is also called SAMHSA. And that's of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Now, having said that, the FCC reached out to SAMHSA to advise them of the deaf community's requests to make DVC available. And we were informed that SAMHSA is actively discussing how to provide DVC to the Lifeline. Our understanding is that they're hoping to provide this service in fiscal year 2023. They have already implemented DVC, which is direct video calling, on their disaster and distress helpline. And that is a 24/7 service as well. So they're planning to build on top of that experience to roll out DVC on a larger scale for the Lifeline. For more information about 988 in general, please visit www.fcc.gov/988. The second thing I wanted to cover in the emergency space is that we released in August a public notice reminding industry about the obligation to ensure that televised emergency information is accessible to persons with disabilities. That includes broadcasters, cable operators, and satellite television services that deliver video programming directly to your homes, and their need to ensure that that emergency information is accessible. It includes information about how people can find that emergency information, including ASL videos on our website, and how to file complaints as well, because we are here to work with you all and to make sure that your lives are protected to the extent possible with accessible information. You've already heard from Chairwoman Rosenworcel about the forums that we hosted about emergency information back on October 6th. That was actually the third of 3 forums that we've had, focused on the CVAA obligations. The first was about online closed captioning, and that was December 2nd. The second was March 28th, focused on audio descriptions for online. And October 6th, the most recent one, was focused on emergency information, which was a very valuable discussion about both current and future possibilities to ensure that emergency information is accessible. One more forum that we held focused on the Digital Skills Gap Symposium and Town Hall. That was September 22nd. We examined the issues and challenges that states have in addressing the need for digital skills training. It also focused on disability issues and trying to close that digital divide, as well as advancing digital literacy for all Americans. We had a representative from Disability In on that panel to really focus on disability topics. The last thing that I'd like to share with you all has to do with the important ACP program, the Affordable Connectivity Program. It was announced on August 8th that we will have $100 million available in funding to maximize and increase outreach efforts, to increase awareness about the $14 billion funding that's available for the Affordable Connectivity Program, so that households can get connected to the internet. We encourage entities of all types and diverse organizations, including organizations serving, led, or owned by people with disabilities, to submit applications for this outreach grant program once we do announce and release the Notice of Funding Opportunity. It's called a NOFO. For more information, please feel free to visit www.fcc.gov/ACP. There's so much more we do, but to keep it brief for now, just want to say that I'm honored to be here with you all today. And I agree with all of those who've spoken before me about the importance of our work. And thank you all for your contributions, your participation, and engagement. With that, I will turn it over to Elliot Greenwald to continue with Relay Services highlights. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Susie. This is Elliot. I'm glad to be here today, and hopefully the next DAC meeting we'll all see each other in person. And so anyway, I'm going to talk about a few of the developments over the last several months in Relay Services. Commissioner or Chairwoman Rosenwurzel already mentioned that the item that was adopted at the Commission's meeting in September on carceral communications. And I'll add to that in that fourth report and order, the Commission deferred consideration of applying the requirements in jurisdictions, and that's jurisdictions, not facilities. So it'd be the total of where average daily population of the entire jurisdiction is 50 or more incarcerated persons. So that would not be a per facility question, cutoff, but it's rather a for the entire jurisdiction. So really, we're really talking about rural counties and rural small cities where the jurisdiction would be operating a facility with fewer than 50 or more incarcerated persons. So the sixth further notice of proposed rulemaking seeks comment on that question of whether to apply the rules to these rural facilities. So we also ask a few other questions, whether to allow enterprise registration for Internet Protocol caption telephone service in correctional facilities, and whether charges for any inmate calling services for incarcerated people with disabilities should be disclosed in accessible formats. That was unfortunately not a question raised in one of the earlier notices, so we picked up on that and therefore seeking comment on that issue as well. And the item has not yet been published in the Federal Register, but once the further notice of proposed rulemaking is published in the Federal Register, comments will be due 30 days and reply comments 60 days after publication. So we look forward to your comments. And then move on. Now I'm going to move backwards in time to June 30th, where the Commission and the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau released 5 TRS items. So the first one was an order that established the annual order establishing provider compensation formulas for traditional TRS, that's a TTY based TRS, STS, and the analog version of caption telephone service for the rate year running from July 1, 2022 through July 30th, 2023. The commission also extended the expiration date, the order also extended the expiration date of the current compensation formulas for video relay service, IPCTS, through June 30th, 2023, or the effective dates of FCC actions establishing compensation formulas for VRS and IPCTS. Also, on June 30th, the FCC released a report and order modifying the compensation plan for the provision of IP relay and adopted a 4-year plan that began on July 1st, 2022, and set the base compensation level of approximately $1.95 per minute, with annual adjustments for inflation and certain other costs. And then there was another report and order on June 30th, expanding the TRS fund contribution base for support of VRS and IP relay. So starting in the next rate year, that would be July 1st, 2023. So the contributions made from the from the common carriers as well as from the VoIP providers will be based not just on not just on interstate and international services, but intrastate services will be covered as well, in terms of what the contribution base includes. And that harmonizes the way contributions are supporting IPCTS and VRS, rather for VRS and IP relay, the same as the way contributions are supporting IP CTS. And another item was a rulemaking proceeding which was concerning VRS and IPCTS. The report and order amended the rules to allow VRS and IPCTS consumers who are registering for service for the first time or changing their service provider to begin using the service without delay for up to 2 weeks, pending completion of the user registration process. This requires a Paperwork Reduction Act approval from the Office of Management and Budget, which that process is ongoing right now. Then there was a notice of proposed rulemaking in which where the FCC made a number of proposals to make changes in the VRS rules to address issues that have come up during the pandemic, where the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau had waived rules, where experience from operating with those waivers in effect has led to the conclusion that's worth examining whether some of these waived rules can be modified. So the NPRM proposes first to increase from 50% to 80% the portion of monthly VRS minutes that may be handled by a communications assistant as a CA working from home, eliminate or modify the requirement that to work at home, a VRS CA must have at least 3 years of ASL interpreting experience, allow VRS providers to use contract CAs for up to 30% of their monthly call minutes, and allow interstate TRS fund compensation for calls placed by registered VRS users to the United States from outside the country for up to 1 year after leaving the country, as long as the users notify their provider of such travel at any time prior to the first such call. So that would basically make the rules more flexible. And comments will be due 30 days and replies due 60 days after the proposed rule summary is published in the Federal Register. Publication has not happened yet, but should happen very soon. Now, in an order, the FCC temporarily waived the current 50% cap on at-home call minutes, the 3-year experience requirements for at-home CAs, and the prohibition on contracting for VRS CAs, and those waivers are in effect for up to 1 year pending outcome of the notice of proposed rulemaking. And in the declaratory ruling, the FCC increased from 4 weeks to 1 year the maximum period of time for which the TRS fund will support a registered VRS user's calls to the United States from abroad. And the fifth item, the commission had to do with the pandemic rule waivers, and the commission, with only a few exceptions, basically allowed the pandemic waivers to expire. So basically, and at this point, the only rules that are waived are not really the pandemic waivers anymore, but the waivers that are now part of the rulemaking proceeding I just talked about. So those aren't really pandemic waivers anymore. They're just rules that are waived to maintain the status quo while the rulemaking proceeding is under consideration. The FCC has also been active in the application area, applications for certification. On September 26th, the FCC released a public notice requesting states, the District of Columbia, and the U.S. territories to apply for renewal of their TRS certifications no later than December 1st, 2022, so the commission can consider and process those applications. The current TRS certifications for the state programs, state and territory programs, are scheduled to expire on July 25th. On October 12th, the FCC released a public notice seeking comment on an application filed by InnoCaption for full certification to provide internet protocol caption telephone service. InnoCaption has been operating under conditional certification, and InnoCaption's conditional certification to provide IPCTS using ASR will expire on December 11th of this year, comments are due October 26th, or were due October 26th, and reply comments are due November 7th, only a week from now, and after that, the record will be complete, and the FCC can, the Bureau can hopefully issue a decision. And on October 12th, the FCC released a public notice seeking comment on certification application filed by Nageesh to provide fully automatic based IP CTS and IP relay. And comments for that are due November 14th, and reply comments are due November 29th. And lastly, on September 22nd, the FCC released a public notice seeking comment on a petition for rulemaking filed by T-Mobile, asking the FCC to amend its rules by deleting references to the American Standard Code for Information Interchange, also known as ASCII text format in the rule, on the grounds that those requirements that TTY-based relay service be capable of communicating with ASCII text format has outlived its utility. Comments were due October 24th. Reply comments are also due a week from now on November 8th. And that concludes my report, and I will turn the floor back over to the chairs.
Thank you. Thank you, Elliot. And really, it is such important information from you all. I'm sure many of those folks watching do have questions. And so I do want to go ahead and remind you all to please send in your questions to live questions through the email address livequestions@fcc.gov. There is a team who will be gathering those questions and answering. Moving on with our agenda, I would like to welcome Kyle Dixon from NCTA, Vice President. He's going to go ahead and lead our discussion and vote on the recommendation from the Working Group on Internet Protocol Caption Files Transmission, that working group, also called IP Captions Group. Over to you, Kyle.
Hi there, everyone. Apologies for that. I was having a little bit of trouble unmuting myself. Doesn't matter how long the pandemic has lasted, I still have trouble doing that. I'll go ahead and get started. Just to describe myself, I'm an African-American guy with glasses, bald head, and a very, very gray beard. I'm wearing a pink shirt and a blue tie. So in terms of the work of the working group, I wanted to go through a few slides, and I'll make this caveat later, but obviously the slides are really just to kind of get the conversation going in the context of this Zoom. And you should definitely refer directly to the draft report itself for clarity. But just to remind you of what we were about, the mission of promoting closed captioning is so complex that we wanted to start with a reminder of what piece of the puzzle we are working on here. So I've included a stock photo of a bowl of popcorn and TV remote with the language that defines the scope of the working group as given to us. As you know, there are a couple of prongs. First, we are to identify issues and best practices regarding the transmittal and receipt of captioning data for full-length content viewed online. And then secondarily, to identify potential solutions to increase the amount of captioned programming online. Our general approach to complete this assignment was to engage in two major initiatives in the working group since I started in late March. First, we had an informative speaker series within the working group featuring representatives from a number of companies, including Apple, Bridge Multimedia, and YouTube. And then we constituted what I've been calling a subcommittee of the willing who volunteered their time for more than 2 months, actually more than 2 months, to pull together the initial version of the draft of this report that the working group went back and forth on and then ultimately voted on, so that presenting the draft that you have in front of you. So as we started to dig into this issue, the drafting subcommittee quickly discovered that this project was even more difficult than we expected. Even with a lot of folks, unlike myself, I'm a lawyer, even with folks with technical backgrounds and other input from our respective organizations, The challenge we faced was to produce an initial draft quickly when few, if any, parties have full knowledge of all parts of the captioning ecosystem. And also to try to describe what we were finding and potential opportunities, which I'll get into later, that is speaking from a level of detail that's helpful to those who may be less familiar with captioning, while providing enough technical information to sort of illustrate those challenges. The challenge really derives in part from the wide-ranging diversity in content, distribution platforms, devices and apps that you know as consumers characterize the rapidly evolving video marketplace. So to meet that challenge, our approach was to devote a lot of time to really trying to understand as much as we could about the breadth and complexity of what we are calling the captioning ecosystem. We knew that this would provide a good real-world context for us to examine potential challenges in the captioning ecosystem, but also potential opportunities in the ecosystem. And again, as I mentioned before, I put these slides together really as a paraphrase for what's in the draft report. So to the extent any of it is not clear, please do refer to the report itself. So like the draft report itself, I'm starting here with a diagram. This is basically a copy of what's in the draft report. And what's depicted is a series of icons representing major functions in the captioning ecosystem. The icons read from left to right with small arrows illustrating how those functions lead from caption creation to editing of those captions in the video itself, through distribution, which could be over broadcast, cable, satellite, on-demand apps, to things like consumer receiving devices, TVs, set-top boxes, streaming devices like Roku, and other internet-connected devices. And in some cases, there are, in addition, these software video players that sit on those different devices. The drafting subcommittee and subsequently the working group as a whole went back and forth regarding how to kind of do justice to the diversity and complexity of the ecosystem without making the diagram too complicated to be helpful. So please try to keep in mind that this diagram is fairly simplified. Among other things, each of the main functions, such as caption creation, distribution, et cetera, is done by several different companies and other organizations. Also, the same piece of content or the same movie or television show, for example, may be distributed in multiple ways, thus requiring different processes and technical specifications for related captioning. The process does not always proceed smoothly from left to right in terms of from caption creation to display to consumers. In some cases, despite best efforts, some steps may need to be repeated. So let's drill down a little bit more. And I should have started by saying toward the end, there will be an opportunity for questions, either for me or for the technical folks on the working group itself. But let's drill down a little bit into some of these functions. Caption creation. Captions are initially created by a content creator, owner, or provider, either internally or by using a vendor. And an individual program may be distributed in multiple ways, so the captions may need to be converted to multiple different formats and specifications. It's not as simple as in the word processing context, cutting and pasting language from one document to another. It requires more work than that. In terms of editing caption data, captions may be edited at various points in the workflow. For instance, pre-recorded broadcast and cable programming may be reformatted for timing and the insertion of commercials, which can vary greatly depending on how the content is being distributed, the many ways in which the content is being distributed. And in addition to technical format edits, there are often recuts of a show or film. You're familiar with the term director's cut, for example, of a big superhero movie, for example. And when that happens, that can also impact, as some of the speakers mentioned before, the duration of the program and the accuracy and synchronicity of the associated captions. For distribution, that includes the content provider delivering the video and time-coded caption data to the content distributor, which may take a variety of delivery forms. In some cases, we saw and do see that that file is sort of embedded with the video itself. Again, as a non-engineer, I can only sort of conceptualize that, but sometimes the captioning is actually sort of embedded with the video, and sometimes it's essentially a sidecar or a separate file that rides along with the video. If a content distributor offers programming to consumers in more than one way, it may receive more than one video or caption format for the same programming or other content, again, depending on the technical needs of its distribution platforms. The distributor will then make the media, including captions, available for transmission over its distribution platform to the end user's receiving devices. As I was suggesting, captions will be rendered through that device or an application sitting on that device. For all of the sort of preceding functions to be useful, of course, captions must ultimately be displayed so that audiences can see them or hear them or otherwise consume them. So captioning formats associated with an older device might produce an inconsistent experience compared to a recently manufactured smart TV. One of the themes that we saw in our discussions is that, as everyone knows, technology innovation continues to move forward, and so that leads to changes in how things are done from a technical matter, which factors into the complexity of solving the issue of captioning. Also, most devices offer their own proprietary player environment, which can also result in different viewing experiences. As consumers, we also know that sometimes video is made available again over video player apps that sit on devices, and depending on the digital platform used by the viewer, either the content provider or a third party would be displaying that digital programming through that video player. And we also can see a distinction in how different types of programming is handled. So for pre-caption programming, the existence of multiple specifications among software development kit manufacturers or SDK manufacturers means that programmers need to deliver multiple captioning format types for digital delivery of full-length content. This slide is really to just sort of underscore a point I've made before, which is that how captioning is done and distributed varies both with the nature of the content, for example, live versus pre-produced, as well as the manner of distribution, whether it's sort of linear or pre-scheduled programming or on-demand programming. So examples of how workflows can differ are provided here. I won't get into detail here because I think you understand the point, and in the interest of time, I'll keep moving. But I think the punchline is that given these complexities, some content creators and distributors have already begun to implement quality control processes to facilitate the exchange of captions within the ecosystem, such as by developing policies and procedures to test the pass-through of captioning files. And those may include working to ensure that the consistency of captioning availability across video platforms and devices. In some cases, it may even involve some uses of automated technology along with human oversight to address captioning issues, particularly with respect to back catalogs of programming. So based on the foregoing real world sort of technical backdrop, we started to articulate the potential challenges to the working group's goals of, again, promoting the transmittal and receipt of captioning data for full-length programming viewed online, and secondly, generally promoting the amount of caption programming online. We saw two types of challenges, and this slide handles the first category. Those two types of challenges are technical challenges and human and organizational process challenges. I think Commissioner Starks actually referred to that distinction in his opening remarks. The technical challenges, in some cases, are easier to address in that for parties that have the requisite expertise and resources, you can imagine very smart engineers getting in a room and coming to consensus as to how to address a problem. And these technical challenges include things like caption corruption, where captions are unintentionally corrupted at some point in the workflow, referring to that diagram that I showed you earlier. There can be time code shifts that arise when a service or content owner inadvertently changes the time code of the content by adding commercials or service bumpers to sort of remind you who's offering this or displaying this great programming. There are technical issues with captions for older programming, which may have captions that were dependent on older technology. Sometimes, as is always the case when you're dealing with the digital space, you can have software bugs. There may be bugs at some point in the chain, and those need to be sort of resolved. And then the challenge posed simply by editing tools. There are situations in which captions may need to be recreated because program content and timing are changed, but the participants either lack the underlying files that they need to actually manipulate to do the appropriate editing, or they don't have the full suite of tools necessary to keep the captions in sync during the editing process. So those are some of the challenges. But I also mentioned that there were human or organizational challenges, and in some respects, we can continue to make progress with these, but they may be harder to crack in that different parties in the ecosystem have to sort of collaborate to make things happen. First, those parties need to be aware that challenges exist, something that the Commission and this committee can be helpful in doing. And then secondly, those parties need to figure out how they will collaborate given their different ways of doing things, some of which, as we've seen, are driven by different types of technology for distribution and display of captions, et cetera. Again, going back to that, again, simplified diagram about the workflow for captioning files. So some of these human and organizational process challenges include situations in which the caption is missing from the distribution chain, situations in which captioning is available but may not be usable by the end user. And that can include situations in which captions have been created at various parts of the distribution chain, but for whatever reason, they're not available to the participant in the ecosystem that really needs to make use of them to make them available to audiences. There can be a lack of expertise or awareness among particularly small content creators. And similarly, there can be a lack of awareness among app developers, which may create apps with interfaces that don't necessarily support captions or that use playback methods for advertising that impede captions. I've mentioned the challenges of recutting or editing video. Part of that is a technical challenge, and part of it is a human or organizational process challenge. And then finally, there can be a lack of awareness among those authoring content creation, ownership and delivery context, such that those contracts don't define expectations. Obviously, we have a fairly private sector driven system, and in many cases, a lot of these considerations can be dealt with in contracts, and so. But if there's a lack of awareness among those writing the contracts, then you can run into some shortcomings there. Now for the potential opportunities, which obviously is where we've all been driving toward. So there are potential opportunities in sort of two categories, sort of what participants in the ecosystem can do directly, as well as things that the commission can do. In terms of what participants in the ecosystem can do, they can do things such as develop internal policies and procedures to test pass-through of captioning throughout their distribution chains, to help ensure the consistency of captioning availability across video platforms and devices, as well as, again, including those captioning delivery requirements in those licensing and distribution agreements that I mentioned just a moment ago. They can, where quality control problems are observed, offer separate caption delivery to avoid re-exporting full video assets. Again, the hope is to always make use of what everyone in the ecosystem is doing rather than different players having to recreate the wheel. So trying to do that as much as possible. Participants in the ecosystem also can develop opportunities to support the secure exchange and sharing of captioning files to avoid duplication of captioning work. The commission, in addition, can encourage app stores, captioning vendors, and distribution platforms to promote education, awareness, and documentation of development and use of accessible video technologies, APIs or application programming interfaces, and development practice to help ensure that app developers incorporate captioning support. The commission can encourage efforts by developers, vendors, and providers of video editing and production tools to ensure that such tools are available to creators to promote the availability and utility of captions. And then the commission can help educate video creators at all levels about the importance of treating captioning as an integral part of the creative process. So there's a lot to do here, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of potential opportunities. Just to underscore again, part of the heaviest lift of putting this report together is really doing our best to really understand the technical backdrop. And having done that is how we manage to identify these challenges and opportunities for your consideration. And so that's it. I just wanted to reiterate my sincere gratitude as chair of the working group to our drafting subcommittee of the Willing, as well as the working group as a whole. It always kind of warms my heart to see so many smart people with different constituencies working together to kind of move things forward. So again, thank you for all of your input on the working group, and I look forward to any questions that the full committee has. And I believe I should stop sharing my screen right now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kyle. Now we're going to go ahead and have a formal procedure of the vote of this proposal for all of you. So we are going to ask that the members accept this proposal. And we are going to call a vote.
If I could.
So if you could please either raise your hand in support or give us a thumbs down for not supporting, or you can abstain. So first, I'm going to call on the roster ACT. Great, thank you, Brian. All right, now I have the American Council of the Blind. I'm unable to see you if you're here. Give me just a second. So I might need the interpreter's help because I'm unable to see anybody on the screen. Have you voted? Maybe they're abstaining. Okay, let's move on to the American Foundation for the Blind, AFD. AFB rather, excuse the interpreter.
This is Sarah Miller. AFB votes yes.
Great, thank you. Apple?
Apple votes yes.
Great, thank you, Apple. The ARC?
The ARC votes yes.
Great, thank you, the ARC. AT&T?
AT&T votes yes.
Great, thank you, AT&T. Bridge for Multimedia?
Bridge Multimedia votes yes. Thank you.
Great, thank you. The Civil
Cerebral Palsy Adult
CPADO?
Organization. City of Boston.
City of Boston says yes.
Great, thank you, City of Boston. Clear Captions?
Hello, Clear Captions votes yes.
Great, thank you, Clear Captions. NBC?
NBC Universal and Comcast.
Yes, Comcast, NBCU, votes yes.
Great, thank you. CSD, Communication Services for the Deaf.
Votes yes.
Great, thank you. Consumer Technical Association, CTA.
CTA votes yes.
Great, thank you, CTA. Convo Communications.
Convo is in support, yes.
Great, thank you, Convo. CTIA, Willis Agency. I'm not seeing CTA. CTIA rather. All right, hearing none. Next on the list, I have the Deaf Blind Consumers in Action, DBCA.
Blind Consumers in Action vote yes.
Great, thank you. DIC PTA.
DCAPTA.
DCAPTA vote yes.
Moving on to Hamilton Relay.
Hamilton Relay votes yes.
Thank you. HLAA, Hearing Loss Association of America.
HLAA votes yes.
Thank you. InnoCaption. Oh, great. Thank you. I see that they vote yes They typed that in the chat. Thank you to the interpreter. IBM.
IBM votes yes.
Thank you. The National Association of State Relay Administrators, NASRA. NASRA votes yes.
Nazara votes yes.
Great, thank you. NAB, National Association of Broadcasters.
The National Association of Broadcasters votes yes.
National Association of the Deaf.
National Association of the Deaf votes yes.
Thank you. National Black Deaf Advocates, NBDA. That is me. We are in support, voting yes. In support. The National Emergency Numbering Association, NENA.
Nina votes yes.
Thank you. NFB, National Federation of the Blind.
National Federation of the Blind votes yes.
I see also in the chat that CTIA votes yes as well. Sorry that they missed their turn. Thank you for that. NCTA, the Internet and Television Association.
NCTA votes yes.
Thank you. Perkins School for the Blind. Thank you. Moving on. Sorensen Communications.
Sorensen votes yes.
Thank you. Moving on. Telecommunications for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, Inc.
EDI votes yes.
Thank you. T-Mobile US, Inc.
T-Mobile votes yes.
Thank you. Trace Research and Development Center.
Trace Center votes yes.
Thank you. Verizon Communications.
Verizon votes yes. Thank you.
Thank you. ZP Better Together.
ZP votes yes.
ZP.
ZP votes yes.
Okay. You voted? Okay. I believe that is all for the list of voting members. And the rest are ex officio members who will not be voting. Did I miss anybody here? Seeing none. Okay, so the motion passes, I believe then, which means we can go ahead and have a 5-minute break. Please come back, and my co-chair Brian is going to take the lead for the next group. Thank you. I also wanted to see if
Meridian.
This is Josh here. I just wanted to give the opportunity to Kyle Dixon to come back just for a moment here if he'd like to express his appreciation as well as I wanted to thank Kyle for the hard work as being a chair of this committee, or this working group, I should say.
Yeah, thank you, Josh. Very much a team effort. So thank you so much to really the whole working group. You really got your hands dirty and involved your respective technical and other teams. So again, really could not have pulled this together without you. So thanks, Josh, and thanks to everyone in the working group.
All right, thanks. Just let me know. I'll sign up for it.
So glad we were able to have this successful working group. And now we're able to have a 5-minute break. So please come back at 2:36 p.m. Eastern Time.
Get forward with our agenda this afternoon. So I'm going to turn it over to our chair, Brian, who is going to give us a few comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Welcome back from the break. Been a great meeting so far. Let's continue on with the agenda here. Basically, our next agenda item here is a facilitated conversation on RDA, requests for dispute assistance. So really, I think what I should do here is turn it over to Will Shell, Deputy Chief of the DRO, and Daryl Cooper, Attorney Advisor with the DRO, to lead a facilitated conversation on the RDA process.
Hey, everyone. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back in the Disability Advisory Committee and to be part of the last DAC meeting of the term. I bet some of you thought it would never end, and some of you can't believe it's already over. So today we're going to discuss the request for dispute assistance process, also known as RDAs. For the viewing audience and for anyone else who's not aware, the Disability Rights Office receives two different types of complaints. One complaint is called an informal complaint, and these complaints cover a wide variety of topics like disability access to video programming, emergency information, hearing aid compatibility, and other topics. These complaints are sent to the covered entities for them to provide a response and to provide assurance that they're in compliance with the relevant rules. The RDAs, on the other hand, have a different process, and that's what we want to discuss. But before we get into the details of the RDA process, we need to discuss briefly the statute that established the need for this process. So Section 717 of the CVAA required the Commission to adopt rules that facilitate the filing of informal complaints with the Enforcement Bureau. Specifically, the complaints that allege non-compliance with Section 255, 716, and 718, and which we'll cover in a second, and to establish procedures for enforcement actions by the Commission. That statute also requires that when one of these informal complaints has been received, an investigation is completed and a finding of a violation or of no violation is made within 180 days. In establishing the regulations associated with this process, the RDA was born. The RDA process is specifically designed to facilitate a resolution by bringing the two parties together for 30 days before the informal complaint is filed. So, in other words, the RDA is a 30-day pit stop on the way to the informal complaint. So, there are just a limited number of issues that can be filed as an RDA. Specifically, Section 255 covers telecommunication services and equipment. Under this rule, telecommunications equipment manufacturers and service providers must make their products and services accessible to people with disabilities if access is readily achievable. Products and services covered under Section 255 include things, includes all of the hardware and software, telephone network equipment, and telecommunications equipment used in the home or office. Things like telephones, wireless handsets, fax machines, answering machines, and pagers. And it's my favorite, pagers. And the services associated with all of those, including telephone calls, call waiting, speed dialing, call forwarding, computer-provided directory assistance, call monitoring, caller ID, call tracing and repeat dialing, as well as voicemail and interactive voice response systems that provide callers with the menu of choices. Some of that sounds kind of old school, like fax machines and pagers, but there's another provision for the new school, specifically Section 716 covers advanced communication services, also known as ACS. ACS includes interconnected and non-interconnected VoIP services, electronic messaging service, which includes things like text messaging and instant messaging and email, and interoperable video conferencing service. To be accessible, the main functions of a product or service must be locatable, identifiable, and operable by individuals with varying abilities. And all information necessary to operate and use the product or service must have an accessible output or display. To be usable, individuals with disabilities must be able to learn about and operate the products and services, and the services features, and must be able to access information and documentation for the product or service, including instructions and user guides. In addition, companies must provide access to support services such as technical support hotlines and databases and call centers, service centers, repair services, and billing services. Finally, internet browsers installed by manufacturers on equipment used for advanced communication services must be accessible and usable for individuals with disabilities, unless doing so is not achievable. So, before we get into the details of how RDAs are structured and how they work, I think we should go to Daryl, who will talk about examples of RDAs and the successes of that process.
Hi, this is Daryl Cooper. I'm a lawyer in the Disability Rights Office. Thanks, Will. Every 2 years, we send a report to Congress that discusses the RDAs that we've handled. In 2020 and 2021, we handled 447 RDAs that were resolved successfully. And I'm going to give you an overview of the subjects of those RDAs and also the types of people who pursued them and the accessibility barriers that were overcome. These RDAs were brought by people with a wide range of disabilities. The RDAs helped individuals obtain specific devices and services, such as texting devices and email apps. Other RDAs required systemic fixes. These RDAs required companies to rewrite smartphone apps, create app phone features, produce new device interfaces, alter equipment, create new websites, and implement company-wide training. While each RDA was brought by a unique individual, some RDAs can be grouped by disability community. For example, 5 people with mobility disabilities filed. One person who was unable to use his voice or limbs was able to use a visual keyboard to send text messages. However, he was unable to log in independently because the method for authenticating his identity required him to hold a device. One person with a motor skills disability stated that she needed a phone that did not exceed a specific weight, could be held in one hand, and had large raised tactile keys. One person stated that she needed a phone that had flat sides instead of curved sides. One person stated that he needed a one-handed on-screen Dvorak keyboard. 4 people with cognitive disabilities sought accessible phones and accessible services. One person stated that he needed help with voicemail that was read too quickly. One person stated that his carrier's phone tree was not accessible. 2 people needed assistance finding accessible 3G replacement phones. These phones their accessible phones would no longer operate once the carrier shut down the networks. 11 people who were blind or visually impaired had difficulty finding accessible feature phones. Phones were found for each of these individuals. Filers stated that 3 websites and 6 text messaging apps were not readable by screen readers or braille readers. One person who is deafblind was unable to pair his braille reader with a text messaging device. Other filers did not have accessible ways to set up their devices or use phone features. People who are blind stated that they were not independently able to activate their phones because the SIM card numbers were not provided in an accessible format. The SIM card numbers were typed on a piece of paper. A total number of 4 people were unable to replace their phone's SIM cards. Some filers requested free 411 or asked for bills in large print or braille. In 5 RDAs, people who are deaf or hard of hearing stated that they did not have access to visual voicemail. Some RDAs involved customer service that was not accessible. This was either because customer service could not explain accessibility features or because customer service itself was not provided in an accessible way. For example, a caregiver for a person with a mobility disability stated that a salesperson used derogatory language about her client and would not sell him a phone. One person who's deaf stated that in one store, the salespeople would not provide her with a pen and paper so that she could communicate. A woman with cochlear implants stated that she was unable to get customer service to unlock her phone. 2 people with cognitive disabilities needed accessible customer service to explain the accessibility features of their phones. As you can see, in the past 2 years, DRO has addressed a wide variety of RDAs, and all the RDAs that I listed, that I just spoke about and are listed on this page here, were resolved after some initial bumps in the road. The companies engaged, the consumers engaged, we engaged, and they were brought to resolution. And I'm going to pass it back to Will to continue talking about the resolutions.
All right. So what does the process for RDAs look like? It's fairly straightforward. First, we need the basic complaint information. So anyone can submit an RDA complaint by going to fcc.gov/RDA form. That's fcc.gov/RDA FORM. People can also submit their complaints in any other way that works for them. They can call us at 202-418-2517. They can call us on a video phone and speak directly to someone at the FCC in sign language at 844-432-2275. Or you can email us at dro@fcc.gov. You can also, classically write it on a napkin and mail it into the office, and we'll get it. The information that's required on these complaints includes the requester's name and contact information, the name of the manufacturer or service provider, an explanation of why the requester believes the manufacturer or service provider is in violation of these rules, including any details and documentations that they have, any relevant dates that are associated, any other information that may be helpful to understand the nature of the dispute, and a description of any contact with the covered entity. And then one of the most important components that's needed is what does the requester seek in order to resolve the dispute? So all of that is required to be submitted, and the Disability Rights Office, or CGB's, main job is to determine if the issues are covered under one of those sections, 255, 716, or 718. And to determine if there's a disability-related issue. So oftentimes we get RDAs filed from people with disabilities who are not alleging a disability-related issue. An example of that, just in a I'm gonna. Oh, I don't have any power. I'm not the person with the power. Can we click mute on my good friend at Bridge, who I think left his mic open? Anyway, I'll continue on. So an example of someone filing a complaint is someone who has a disability, but who filed a complaint saying that their bill is too high. That would be an example of just the bill being too high doesn't make it a disability-related issue. It is a person with a disability with an issue, and just be not part of the RDA process. So during the 2-year period covered in the report that Daryl was just talking about, we received 295 requests for dispute assistance, and only 49 of them were actually served as RDAs. The bottom line is that we need sufficient information for an allegation of a violation of the rules. Once we have that information, we turn to the Record Keeping Compliance Certification and Contact Information Registry, also known as the RCCI Registry, or RCCCI Registry. The purpose of the RCCI Registry is to enable entities that are required to comply with those sections of the Communication Act and the Commission's rules to submit the required record-keeping compliance certification and their contact information. The record-keeping compliance certification has to state that the covered entities established operating procedures that are adequate to ensure compliance with the Commission's record-keeping rules. And then the contact information is used by consumers. Consumers can actually look up the contact information and reach out to the covered entity directly. Oftentimes, if consumers are having a hard time getting a hold of someone who can kind of understand what they're talking about related to accessibility, it's a good contact to have. But also, we at the FCC use it when we serve an RDA to the company. All that information has to be filed every year before April 1st. And if there's any changes to the contact information, it has to be updated within 30 days. So once we serve a covered entity, we take a few steps. Our focus is to assist both sides on trying to find a resolution. We do this by focusing the two sides primarily on the facts in front of us, or trying to talk about the facts. We try really hard not to talk about the legal side too much. I mean, it comes up, but we're not really in a position to make a determination of law. That is, we only really make a determination about whether there's a sufficient allegation. And we're here to see if we can resolve it in the next 30 days. different things are important to consumers and different things are important to the covered entities. And we tend to keep the consumer and the covered entities away from each other, at least during the start, to kind of get the conversation going back and forth. But not every RDA starts that way. Many RDAs don't need to go between the Disability Rights Office. Some companies are, a lot of RDAs are just simply, addressed by the company in a pretty straightforward manner. So some companies are really surprised to find out that they are covered by the FCC's rules at all. And we try to introduce them to the RDA process and provide resources for them to familiarize themselves with the issues. And Daryl has some real world examples of RDAs and how they were resolved. And then we would really love to hear your thoughts, questions, and suggestions. So Daryl. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted.
Oh,
No,
yeah.
Hi, this is Daryl. Hey, Will.
Hi.
Thanks for giving that overview. I'm going to talk about the way some of the RDAs played out in a general way. But first, I want to say that, it's really been an honor and a privilege to work with so many different consumers and companies. DRO started this 200 years ago, in 2013, started it from scratch, and we have worked with the most interesting, smart consumers who taught us about what accessibility barriers are, why it's a barrier, and we have some dorks like myself who can explain exactly why the app doesn't work or why the email doesn't work. We work with terrific companies, lawyers, engineers, product people who were, solutions oriented. I mean, in most of these RDAs, the phone existed, the service existed. The only question was, why isn't it accessible? And we figured it out. Will and I were kind of reminiscing about this. And we think that on almost every RDA, there was a phone. There was a phone that was accessible. It was just the challenge was trying to locate it. I have one really good example of this. A woman with multiple disabilities needed a phone. She had a 3G phone that was accessible to her, but 3G was being retired and the company needed to find one for her. There was not a phone in the carrier's inventory that would work for her. So over the course of 9 months, the carrier, DRO, and the woman worked together to find a phone that worked. The carrier reached out to a manufacturer whose phones they didn't carry that weren't in their inventory. And it turned out the manufacturer had 2 phones that might work for her, and one was being sold overseas. The carrier certificated that overseas phone to work on its American network, and it worked. It turned out that was the phone that worked for the person with disabilities. And that was a terrible experience. It was a great experience. And at the end, it was just truly a wonderful way of just seeing how the system works. As Will said, I think a lot of people start the RDA really mad. Either the consumer's mad because they've been trying for a long time to get the accessibility they need. If it's the company's first time with an RDA, they're mad because they can't believe that they're going to have to talk to a consumer. Like, why in the world should a company have to talk to a consumer? But over time, they realize this is about problem solving. It's not about a lawsuit. It's not about litigating process rules and jurisdiction and whether you should be here or in California or whatever. It's about finding a product that works. And as soon as people realize that, it becomes wonderful. It's a problem solving exercise. I want to give some examples of really bad RDAs just to provide a little levity, but also to provide examples of what not to do. I mean, here are some examples of consumer requests. One consumer asked that DRO fire the company's board of directors. He also asked for thousands of dollars. Part of our job there was to tell him that the RDA process doesn't do that. Here's an example for a company. For a man whose disability prevented him from holding a phone, the company offered to tape the phone to the wall. Okay, that was a bad entry into the world of disabilities. By far and away, none of the RDAs were like that. Many times the consumer and the company agrees that there isn't an accessibility problem. In those instances, some agreed that a change was cosmetic. Some agreed that a feature was a design choice, not an accessibility barrier. Other RDAs concluded because the filer didn't pursue them. In those RDAs, the consumer might not have responded to emails or calls. As it turns out, or not as it turns out, but our process is after 60 days of inaction, the RDA automatically closes. With rare exceptions, we've never run into a company or consumer who didn't want to reach an agreement. I want to talk really briefly about what we call two-step solutions. Sometimes a two-step solution works if the consumer needs to communicate right away. And second, if the company wants to design a long-term accessibility solution that works for everyone. In the app that I'm thinking of, it was a text and a phone app. It wasn't accessible to screen readers. As part of the resolution, the company created a temporary app that would let that consumer make phone calls and place text messages. The company and the consumer also agreed that long-term, the company would rewrite the website so that it was accessible to screen readers and rewrite the app so that it was accessible to everyone. There have been a fair number of cases that took that approach where we were fortunate that we had reasonable parties where the consumer wanted to be able to make a call now, but also understood that the company couldn't redo its whole system overnight. My final note is I want to note that the RDA process permits RDAs to be filed on behalf of other people. In the past, some RDAs were filed by organizations. These groups filed when a service or device wasn't accessible to people that they represented. So with that, Will, I'm going to pass it back to you for some closing comments and questions.
Thanks. My power went out, so I was gone. I was literally gone. So anyway, I'm back. I'm sure everything that was said was brilliant and that people started raising their hands. But before all of the hands go up, well, actually not before. Please put up your hands if you want to ask questions or make a comment about RDAs. We'll remind everyone that we don't want to talk about specific RDAs as they're really confidential. They're between the company and the consumer, and it's part of the real upside of the RDA process is that these things can be resolved without going into an informal complaint process. If anyone has any hand-raising questions, I'm sure I should just start calling on people. That maybe I should do that. If there's no comments, I should just or questions, I will just reiterate what Daryl said. Was that this has been a really interesting, oftentimes difficult process to work on, and the companies and the consumers, although maybe it's a little disorienting or kind of frustrating at the beginning, I don't think we've ever really had a company or a consumer who didn't want to actually just resolve the issue that's in front of them, if they could. So
I will.
Yes.
Oh, hey, this is Daryl. I wanted to add that, if you're a consumer or an association representing consumer and you have questions about the process, Will and his engagement team and I'm available anytime to talk about it. If you want us to talk to your organizations, like whatever organization you work with about this process, we're happy to talk about it. It's not, once you get into it, it's not that complicated, but I can see why it might be daunting to start.
My new favorite person on the deck, Linda Vanderloop, wants to say something.
Hi, this is Linda Vandeloop, AT&T. And I just wanted to say thank you. We really appreciate the attention that you both and the RDA team, DRO team give to these RDA issues. I think you know we've worked on several, and we really want to resolve them. And a lot of them are very unique, and you really help dig in, identify the issue, and really do work with us, work with the customer to find a solution. So I just wanted to thank you. We really appreciate it. I mean, I think it's a great process because it really gets customers what they need. The one thing we would ask, if you're asking for improvements, and it's minor, it's very minor, is just a consistent communication to let us know when an RDA is officially closed. Sometimes we get an email, sometimes we don't. So just a more consistent feedback process on the resolution.
That's a really good point, Linda. I'll just make a quick comment about that. That it's a really good point because good communication is the key to the success of the RDA process. So we'll definitely make sure that happens. I think what happens sometimes is, well, I shouldn't make any excuses, but I can imagine situations where consumers or where the company and the consumer have actually resolved the issue. And oftentimes we reach out to the consumer to confirm that everything is finished, because both sides have to kind of agree that it's resolved. And sometimes we don't hear back from the consumer, and then maybe we just kind of take too long. But you're totally right. We'll make sure. That's really great feedback. Mark Hill from CPADO.
Okay. I'm Mark Hill. I'm representing CPADO as the president. First of all, I would like to recognize and compliment your work on the RDA and for looking into each RDA for those that are blind or have mobility disabilities. I very much appreciate your work on that. What I do notice that is missing, however, is the ASL component. So the explanation of what RDAs are in ASL. There are many deaf people who may not be fluent in reading English, and so to have that information available in ASL is essential. That way, people are able to better understand what the RDA process is and be able to utilize that process and file a complaint should they need be.
I think that's a really great point. I will have to look into that. We certainly have the means to communicate that. So I really appreciate it, Mark. That's something that we'll look into.
And secondly, another thought came up. Just a moment for the interpretation. So the second thing I wanted to say more specifically is about more information. So you could invite more organizations to provide and present information. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. At this we will definitely take that into consideration as well. I think more organizations communicating about their topics is really valuable. Lisa Hamlin.
Hi, this is Lisa Hamlin from Hearing Loss Association of America. And I first want to thank you both. I think this is a terrific presentation. It really gave me a really good overview of what you do and what the process is. But I had two questions. One question is, have you compared how many complaints come through the informal complaint process, disability related now, as opposed to the RDA? So that was one question in my mind. There are people going in one direction or another. And the second question was, when I was looking at this prior to the meeting, I saw that it feels like it's hidden. It doesn't feel like, I'm wondering if you've thought about or would consider having a link go from the complaint page to RDA and back and forth, because I'm not sure many people know about this.
That's a good point, Lisa. I mean, that's something that we talk about over and over and over again with IT, but that's something we can make that happen. And I'm not blaming IT.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing effort to kind of have the web page be usable, efficient, and the things that are relevant, prominent, right at the forefront. And I couldn't agree more. I have found myself trying to find my way into the RDA complaint form. And so we should probably, relook at a lot of things. In fact, just this morning, I heard another person saying that they, had a hard time finding the informal complaint form for this, the non-RDA complaints. And I'll just answer your question real quickly about the first thing. Have we compared them? Yeah, we have the numbers. But I'm worried I maybe in my presentation maybe confused things a little bit. So informal complaints for the Disability Rights Office, for all the disability related issues that we cover, like video programming and emergency information, that we receive over 1,000 of those complaints. We serve hundreds and hundreds of them. So there's many, many more of those. Those includes closed caption complaints and audio description and accessible user interfaces. The RDAs, we receive a few hundred, and the ones that are actually served is 49. So about 24 a year, about, 24 a year is about where we're at with the RDAs. So anyway, that's the bottom line. But we're also happy to talk more about numbers as well. What were you gonna say, Daryl?
Oh, I was just gonna say, we have 2 more people in queue.
All right. We are off to, I have a note. Divya from DCBA. I'm sorry.
Yes, hello.
Thank you.
This is Divya from DCBA. I just wanted to say thank you both, Will and Daryl. I just want to thank you both for joining us today and explaining the RDA process. That definitely gave me a better understanding on how to reach out or even file a complaint with your team. I, in the past, have shared that information with other deafblind consumers in regards to any issue they're having with any company. However, I have to be honest with you that what was just mentioned by Linda, I have to emphasize that as well, because for those clients that I work with that use Braille readers, I know it's difficult to find where to go if you are going to file a complaint, whether it's formal or informal. And then, as was mentioned earlier, they often need help with the English because, as was mentioned, English is not always that consumer's first language. And so first, finding the correct place to go on the website can be a challenge. And then the second challenge is English is not their first language. And then, as you well know, consumers will then, out of discomfort or fear or frustration, decide either not to file a complaint or take it a little too high up, or not necessarily to individuals that can help resolve their issue. So I think first, they need help in filling out those complaints. Second, they need to have better accessibility, or at least some instruction on how to find that area on the website. I would recommend even a video, maybe just a step-by-step video showing how to access the web page. I myself have gone into consumers' homes where I've sat down with them with my own video that I did from home, just to give them that additional visual for them and myself when I sit down to help them file a complaint. But if those tools could be developed internally, that would be much easier for many clients, not just mine. And I'm sure others here could echo the same thing. It's so difficult when we're doing outreach to our consumers, because it does often require us to go into their home, which is not always convenient for both parties. I think also the level of fear that I did mention earlier, and that level of language ability. They would much rather have that explained to them in American Sign Language rather than English. And because of those two things that I mentioned, many of them do not file a complaint. They just avoid saying anything altogether.
Hi, this is Daryl. Divya, it was nice to meet you last year and start a conversation about this. We agree 100%. You know, one thing to keep in mind is if you go to the disability rights page, it has all this information on it, and prominently displayed is how to file an RDA, how to file a complaint. And so I think, you know, you got to start with that. And I'd like to ask you and the rest of the DAC to provide website links, you know, from your home pages. And if you know the website address, tell them where it is. One thing that Will's team does and that I do is we'll talk to anybody on the phone and we'll help them fill out the complaints. In fact, we do that every day. We do it every day. So that's just something important for people to know, you know. We don't have feet on the ground in the communities, but we want to get the word out.
Yeah, and I'll just add in that, I think if we're getting any message today, it's that, from Mark and Divya and from others, that we need to make this process really clear and in various formats. And I don't see why we can't do that. So I think we'll do our best, but also reach out to our video phone direct ASL communication, or email us directly, and we can help in the process. We can try to overcome those hurdles that you're identifying, and we really appreciate them.
This is Daryl too. Well, I wanted to add that, I just remembered I reached out to Mark a couple of times in the spring saying that we'd meet with his group, and I'd be more than happy to follow through. Just let us know whenever we can do that.
Right. If people want to meet with us, we're happy to do that. I have, we still have a few people lined up. Ian Dillner from Verizon.
Thanks, Will and Daryl. This is Ian from Verizon. Just one brief comment and one brief question, maybe. A brief comment: over the last few years, we've seen, I think, more standardization of the process, and the expectations have been set more clearly and on all sides, on the consumer side and on our side, and that's been a helpful development. So thank you. And then my question kind of stems from something Lisa asked. The disability related Consumer Bureau complaints that come in, is there a relationship between these two processes such that, for example, somebody files an RDA that doesn't state a claim under 255 or ACS? What happens to that? So thank you.
That's a thank you for that. That is, I could talk about this all day. The short version of that is they're just sent to the other department to be handled under the different set of rules, if there is another department. So sometimes they're just not within the FCC's jurisdiction at all. But if there's something that is with, so I gave a very, very like kind of super simple example of someone who said, you know, I'm a person with a disability and my bill is too high. And, you know, we'd usually ask them like, well, what do you mean? You know, we'd ask them for some more information, but ultimately, if it remains just as that, we would pass it on to the non-disability department, the Consumer Complaints Center at the FCC, who would kind of follow their own process at that point. So all of the whatever 295 RDAs that came in, most of them probably go on to live in some other universe. And, you know, in the world of receiving stuff online, everything comes in. So it's, I'm sure you're all familiar with, you know, the RDA form has, you know, received complaints that, you know, were just comments or were kind of anything under the sun. So, but most of them are trying to make a complaint. Yep.
Hey, Will, this is Daryl. I wanted to add, because I think a lot of people have this, is we read every single paper that comes in. The consumers don't know what complaint what paper to file it on, but we read every piece of paper that comes in. So if it's not an RDA, if it's a complaint about something else, we figure out how to help that person. And I say that just to let people know that we're not losing people.
Not very often, at least. Next up is Travis Doherty from NASRA.
Hello there. This is Travis with NASRA. I did get that email yesterday about the RDAs and took a look at it, took a look at the process, and there are some changes from a few years ago. But I'm still concerned that when I take a look at it, at least to find it, right? If I'm searching, it's not easy to find. But once I get to that point, you know, I'm excited to file, I'm ready to file. For instance, with something regarding captioning, it's related to something else. So it doesn't refer me to another page. It doesn't refer me to the correct place to file an informal complaint if I end up in the wrong place. So can this be streamlined all into one sort of system, into one place where it's easy to find? Maybe you could create a separate website, like, for example, filewiththefcc.gov, just as an example. That's my question. If it would be possible to do something along those lines, just that it's easier to access and find. You know, have something that's more consumer friendly. Thank you.
We appreciate that feedback. I think this is definitely the theme of the day, and we we actually really appreciate it. It's giving us really good. We're going to have to go back and think about the whole process. I'll just mention that we have one inherent kind of built-in complication with the disability-related complaints, whether it's an RDA or a closed caption complaint for video programming, is that on the same complaint, so the FCC has their main complaint form, and on that form, there is a complaint for TVs, it says TV. They have one for phones. They have one for emergency information. They have some other stuff. And then they have the disability complaint. And within that, there's complaints for TVs, there's complaints for phones, there's complaints for, emergency information. So I think we definitely do have to think about, like, how can we differentiate kind of some of the TV complaints or the phone complaints from the disability related accessibility complaints. So anyway, it's we appreciate that feedback as well. I think we have one. Well, maybe we have more than one. How are we on time? Well, who's going to save us from all of these questions? I'm so glad people did talk though, because it was.
I'm sorry.
Zainab from NAD is up next.
Hello, this is Zainab with NAD. I'm going to add to the theme of today. Sorry about that, Will and Daryl, but you'll have a bit more of this. However, I just wanted to add from NAD's perspective that often we have consumers reaching out to us with their complaints and concerns, but they have no idea that they can reach out directly to the FCC. So we often have to explain that to them. And I think it would be helpful and beneficial to raise awareness that they can file complaints directly with the FCC. And even those who do know that they can file a complaint with the FCC, many of them, as we've told you multiple times, either can't find it or even if they know where it is, they get frustrated and give up. I think that the complaints process needs to be structured in a way that is easily done by people. People experience barriers on a daily basis. So that's my first comment. Another, I guess, part B of that comment is that I agree with Mark's comment that it's important to have ASL videos on this to make sure this information is accessible. But I just wanted to add in that it's not only about RDAs, but also about the complaints process overall. I think that that would help for people to understand more about it. I also wanted to caution you all that short videos, it needs to be a short video. People are not going to watch a 10-minute video. So that information needs to be easily accessible so that people are still paying attention to it. Another question, a bit of a follow-up here to Lisa's question. And your response was that you typically have 49 RDAs, and as far as complaints, you get about 1,000. And you said earlier that you have, or you resolved about 47 of those 49 RDAs, but I'm wondering about those thousands of complaints that you receive. How many of those are resolved? Because from what I see from the NAD membership who reaches out to us, and we tell them, of course, to file with the FCC, many of them say that they're not resolved or that they're not satisfied. So just wanted to follow up with that question as well. Thank you. Sorry, I had to add to the theme of the day, though.
Well, thank you, Zainab. This is Daryl. Susie just emailed the link. There is an ASL video on how to file a complaint. I do want to add that the DAC is one way we try to raise awareness about what the FCC does, and we're glad that NAD and HLIA are taking note of that so that you can tell your members about how to file a complaint. They can also just come to our website. That's all you need to do is tell them to come to dro.gov. I don't know, well, we can publish, well, the website address is listed on our chat.
Yeah, and there's nothing quite like a government meeting where we all agree. So I am glad that we all agree. And, you know, like I said, I think this is giving us a lot to think about. And particularly, even if the resources are there, how to make them prominent and easy for people to find is there may be more of a design issue rather than messaging issue, but we can look at both design and the message and kind of look at how to make this as easy as possible, because it shouldn't be hard. And regarding the thousands of complaints that we receive regarding closed captions or audio description, so only about 300 or 400 of those are actually served to a covered entity, to a video programmer or a manufacturer of devices, and of those, we do our best to make sure that the issue is resolved legally. There is a difference between consumers being satisfied and the issue being outside of our area. And so I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but we try to follow up with every single complaint. We make an effort by communicating with the consumers about whether or not they're satisfied with it. If they tell us they're not satisfied and we believe that it is actually resolved, right, which is actually a fairly rare circumstance, we try to tell them why we think that it is legally resolved, even if they're not satisfied. Both things can be true, that the consumer can be upset and the issue is actually resolved. That's for the next DAC, I think. The follow-up on that. I think we have one last person, although I'll double check.
Blake. Yeah.
From TDI. We don't want to miss it.
Blake is muted, I think.
Yes, somehow you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Will. Thanks, Daryl. I'll be very quick because I know I'm between us and leaving, but just to co-sign the chorus of comments that have been made already. I know there are some rough edges that could potentially be filed off of the RDA and the complaint process, and agree with many of the suggestions folks have made along those lines today. I just want to underscore, I think no matter how smooth the process is and how efficient it is, it's really important to remember that there's a tremendous amount of life admin, as disability law scholars would call it, that goes into filing a complaint that's above and beyond what a consumer typically needs to put in to use a product. And some of the things that people need to file complaints about are relatively low in value. It's watching a TV show and making sure the captions for that particular TV show are correct. Some of them may be somewhat more valuable, getting access to email, getting access to a communications device that they use more regularly. But we just encourage the commission to underscore that whenever somebody files a complaint or an RDA, that is indicative of probably the tip of an iceberg of problems. There are a lot of people that are just never going to file a complaint because the burdens are too high. And with that, I think it's really important that the commission take those complaints that are resolved, or even the ones that are not, which may point out a legitimate problem but are beyond the scope of the commission's legal boundaries, and find ways to make sure to funnel that into policy, which I know happens a little bit through the report that's issued. But I think it's worth thinking about publicizing the results in a way that you've done today a little bit, but more systemically, and emphasizing how the commission is going to drive the results, both positive and negative, into policy making. Typically in disability dispute resolution that's handled through litigation under the ADA, there's not only the ability to draw costs and fees, which gets lawyers involved to resolve some of the complicated legal issues. But there's also case law. There's a common law that gets built. There's an understanding of how the law applies. And I think it'd be really helpful to think about how the RDA process and the informal complaint process could better flow through the experiences that people are having into the development of further policy. I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. I think that was an excellent summary, I think, of the comments we got. And I'll take one quick look, but I think that is, we're going to call this one done. Yep. I'm so happy people actually spoke. And I appreciate everybody on the call. And it's great to actually see people. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one more. I'm being notified. I thought Divia's hand was still up. I was passing her by, but it sounds like her hand is.
Yes, just one last thing that I forgot to mention earlier. I have noticed as well with some of the deafblind consumers that I work with, there is some confusion in regards to what the FCC actually handles in terms of complaints. And thank you for explaining how that is separated on the website as well. But I think that often I'm educating consumers that they can't just contact the FCC if they have an issue in regards to their medical provider or transportation. And so there might be some misuse there. You did mention that many complaints are forwarded to other departments. So that's helpful for me in educating the consumers that I work with, that there are different departments that handle different complaints. And I think that now that I'm just listening to the discussion, that might be some of the confusion with those that I have worked with. They're maybe filing their complaint and sending it your way when it really should be going somewhere else.
Well, we appreciate that comment, Divya, and we appreciate everyone's comments. We try to help all the consumers who reach out to us, even if it's outside of our area, to get them to the right place if we have any ability to help them. And I'm going to help the whole DAC on passing this back to Josh to lead us out through the next step. And really, it's great to see everybody.
Thank you, Daryl and Will, for that excellent overview of the RDA process. And, we do appreciate all of those comments and questions from the members here. They were excellent questions and comments. And speaking of questions, we're going to turn it over now to public participation, that portion of this DAC, where we receive questions from the audience, from the public. And then now we take this moment to respond to those questions. We did receive one question from Mindy Hill. She asked, did the FCC extend its jurisdiction beyond TV programming as it pertains to closed captioning for online digital streaming platforms such as Google's YouTube? The FCC has broadcast rules, but did the FCC also expand those rules to include online streaming video closed captioning? That was the question. Our response: the FCC started in 2010 with the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, which did expand the FCC's jurisdiction to cover some internet streamed or internet delivered video programming. The internet closed caption rules only apply to a couple of cases. They apply to third-party websites, for example, such as YouTube, that tend to host video from other video providers or producers. This rule applies to third parties such as YouTube if the video program is full length and was shown on television in the past with captions. That display with captions also needs to happen after a certain date, which was a while ago. Now, full-length video programming is programming that is shown on television previously and is provided to end users substantially in its entirety through the internet. We do have some rules that cover video clips. Video clips are excerpts of full-length video programming that has already been shown online. Those rules require video programming distributors that show programming on TV to post captioned video clips on their own websites or applications or apps on their own. So that means that video clips, their rules do not apply to third-party websites such as YouTube for video clips. That's the bounds of our rules. However, we are happy to investigate any accessibility concerns. Please know that the best way to provide us with information about your complaint is through our complaints website, which is www.fcc.gov/accessibility complaint form. Again, that is accessibility complaint form. If needed, you can also email us at dro@fcc.gov, which is a lot shorter than what I just spelled out at that complaints website. What I just explained about the FCC's rules covers some portions of internet video programming. I should also let you know that our jurisdiction is limited by Congress through the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, also called the CVAA. So if people want more than that, we are bound by what Congress has given to us. You can also call us through our voice line at 202-418-2517, or we also have an ASL line where you can call directly in ASL. That is 844-432-2275. And thank you, Mindy, for your question. Now that does conclude the public participation portion. And so I wanted to mention that this is the final meeting of the current term, the current 2-year term we've been meeting virtually the entire time of this term of the DAC. I started a year ago and I still haven't met so many of you in person, even though we've been in close contact on a weekly basis or a daily basis even. So I hope to be able to work in person with you all in the near future. I know that this DAC takes up quite a bit of time and energy, commitment from each member or from each representative. And I do want to show our appreciation for all of the time and commitment. We did send out certificates of appreciation in print and also in an electronic format for some members. We sent those out to show our sincere appreciation of your time investment in this to help us increase accessibility for everyone all around the US. Thank you all. If you haven't yet gotten your certificate, please do let me know, and we will work to try and rectify that. We've heard from a couple of you, and we will definitely follow up. Now I just wanted to say goodbye and pass it over to Brian Scarpelli.
Thank you so much, Josh. And that was a great facilitated discussion there. This is just a chance for me as a co-chair, and then I'll pass it to Isidore to just say thanks and share a few words about our time over the last 2 years. I can keep it quite brief, I think, but I really do want to just share that I'm honored to have been a co-chair of the Disability Advisory Committee, and there's no more important work that I personally am engaged with. I know certainly my organization and the community that my association represents has a strong commitment to disability access, but personally, it's so wonderful to have disparate interests and so much diversity in where people are coming from and interests coming together to develop consensus solutions on these extremely critical issues. And I think you should all be very proud of that as members of the DAC. And I also want to really make sure I give credit to all of the FCC staff who've supported us and all, Josh and Will, everybody. I just name a couple of people jump to mind, though there's so many staff who've been vital to the success of the DAC. So I just want to take a moment to thank you all at the FCC as well, and the FCC's leadership. Last thing I would just mention is I know I have said this before in some previous meetings, but I really do think the last 2 years and the last 2 years before that really are a success. And I think that they are a model for future disability advisory committees, the collaboration and the ability, the willingness to work together and the strong communication across all of our different viewpoints and organizations. It's a model for future disability advisory committees, most certainly. I think it's also a model for finding solutions to sometimes difficult problems with a very high impact on our society, for policymakers in the United States government and state governments and other across the United States in general. And it's even a model for the world. And that's not even hyperbole. I can tell you that for my organization, we engage with policymakers in multilateral fora like the United Nations Internet Governance Forum, as well as directly with regulators in other markets. And they do look to the FCC, and they look to this process and what comes out of this process as a model. So it's something just to be really proud of, and it's global leadership by all of us. So anyway, thank you all again. Honored to serve and appreciate you hearing me out here to close. Thank you. I guess I should pass it to Isidore now for anything you want to say. Isidore, thanks.
This is Isidore Niangabo here, co-chair speaking. I think Brian summed it up well. 4 years, he and I have been serving as co-chairs, plus 2 years have been entirely virtual. And all of your resilience and evolution through these new norms have really, left me with my heart full and a fire to continue serving. One thing I did want to add is that the video world, such as with Zoom, has really helped us understand what accessibility can look like and understand that it can impact our work and specific changes that we still want to see for the future moving forward. So thank you all for being a part of this. I'd like to conclude this meeting by asking if everybody's comfortable to turn on their videos and just wave goodbye as we close this meeting. Really do want to thank everyone. Look forward to meeting you all someday. This meeting is now adjourned at 3:52 Eastern Time. Love you all.
Bye, everyone.